I'm also going to be working on this thing over here, which is obviously a fantastic Chevrolet Bel Air. This car has been standing for quite some time. It's in quite original condition. It's been restored once, and I've spent a little bit of time last week to get it running again, because obviously there was a lot of stuff in the fuel tank that was very dirty. So I flushed out the fuel tank, and now we got to look into the carburetor, because the acceleration pump isn't working. So what happens is that if you run a car and you give a very small amount of throttle, it works totally fine. But as soon as you step on the throttle a little bit more, it basically doesn't get enough fuel. So there's something called an acceleration pump inside the carburetor, and we're going to have a look at that. Let's see if that still works, or if that needs to be rebuilt, or something like that. So we're having a look at the Bel Air, and here you can see the carburetor. It's a float bowl, and here's a very important component, which I'll show you some stuff about later. But what we're looking at right now is the accelerator pump, which is basically a spring-loaded valve which goes in here. And as soon as you apply throttle on the engine, obviously it idles through the carburetor, but it needs to get more fuel when you step on the throttle. So what happens is that accelerator pump is gonna put more fuel in the carburetor, so that it matches the demand of the engine. And there's a couple of problems that always happen with these things. So they get dirty, or they break, or the diaphragm in it goes bad. So we're checking all those things right now. And all the way down there in the bottle, there's a little orifice which should be connected and not blocked by this little piece there with my thumb. So one of the most important things to do is always check if that actually works. So if that's connected, you don't blow too much, because it's all very delicate, and there you can see some air bubbles and stuff coming up. There we go. So that tells me that orifice is actually open. So that's pretty good. So this is the accelerator pump, which has this brand new seal on it, which always goes bad on these things. It's a 2-jet, as they're called. And this is connected to that little thing I showed you in the bottom, that little valve right there in the bottom, just over there. And what actually happens is that if the engine is idling, there is a lot of vacuum. As soon as that vacuum breaks, then this thing goes up. So it's very important that this thing functions very well, that's not stuck or whatever. So we just greased it a little bit, cleaned it with carburetor cleaner. So that actually should function when the vacuum of the carburetor changes. Over here is basically the venturi block, which is where the fuel comes out of. And that thing that I showed you, that acceleration pump, there's two very small holes over here at my very dirty fingernail, and they actually are connected to this orifice right there, and that should be connected and not blocked with those two little holes over there. So what happens is, if you accelerate, that extra fuel comes through that orifice. And it's obviously also very important that you check the function of these. So these are directly connected to these, so they should absolutely not be blocked or dirty, or no sludge or whatever should be coming out of them. Be very careful when you take apart a carburetor like this, because these gaskets, they fail very quickly. So we had it soaked a little bit in special stuff overnight, so we wouldn't tear that up when we took the carburetor apart. That's the choke assembly, that's the fuel filter, and this is the floater which goes into the float bowl. So we've checked all those things, we've cleaned that carburetor completely, and let's see if that accelerator pump works perfectly now. So you always got to be very, very careful with this stuff because it's all very, very delicate. And if you're in a country like mine, like the Netherlands, it's not always easy to get parts, like for the very popular carburetors, like for instance Holley double pumper, which is a carburetor that's used a lot in performance applications. Obviously it's a lot easier to get parts, but for the less mainstream carburetors it's not. This is an extremely often used carburetor in America, obviously. Rochester is a company that majority of the GM cars from the factory had their carburetors from. And so in America it's super easy to get all the parts for them, but over here in Europe it's not always super easy, so you want to be very, very careful that you're not breaking any seals or gaskets or whatever, because you're never sure if you can get them on short notice. So when you're placing this air horn back on the carburetor, you want to make sure that you're doing two things correct, that you're getting the acceleration pump correctly fitted to the spring, which sits in that little hole over there, and you absolutely want to make sure that the gasket sits correct like that. You want to fill up the float bowl a little bit. You can use carburetor cleaner or brake cleaner or something with that, because before you put everything back together again, you want to check if that acceleration pump is actually working again. So what I usually do is I put 1 or 2 screws back in it. 2 is always nice, because then you're absolutely positive that the gasket is sitting correctly. You just put them in, you don't have to put all of them in there. And what you want to do, you want to move the choke out of the way a little bit. I'll grab you guys right here. And you want to look into that carburetor over there, and then you move the accelerator pump and see those orifices actually dispensing that brake fluid or brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner that you put in the carburetor first. So then you know that everything works perfectly well. It's just a little pump. You can actually hear a little bit of pump action if you're moving this up and down. It should go very, very smoothly. Right now it works very, very well. So then you're confident that you can put everything back together. So there she's running very well again. It was already idling pretty well, but now also the acceleration pump is working, so super happy with that. And on to the next job.